You are listening to the FunnelAmplified podcast, where we talk about your growth intensification through social expansion, content amplification, brand magnification, lead generation, conversion optimization, and pipeline acceleration. If you enjoy the show, please write and post your podcast review today. Now let's talk about growing your business. Hey everybody, it's Brandon Lee and welcome to FunnelAmplified. And I'm so excited to have you all today because I have a wonderful guest. And Matt Heinz is somebody that I have been following for years and been on his email database for Heinz marketing and have just been reading and thoroughly enjoying learning from him from a distance. And now I get to have him as a guest on FunnelAmplified. So before I welcome him, let me tell you some of the highlights about Matt and his career. He is a president of Heinz Marketing. He is an amazing keynote speaker. He's the host of Sales Pipeline Radio, and he's the author of several books. And honestly, if you haven't read them, go out and read them. One of his books is Successful Social Selling, and his other book is Move the Mouse and Make Millions. And so, Matt, welcome to FunnelAmplified.
Hey, thanks, Brandon. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really grateful. And as I told you before, I'm a big fan. Been reading your blog for years and been on your email database. And so I'm excited to have a conversation with you today. I know that with your with Sales Pipeline Radio lately, you've been talking a lot about digital selling. You've been talking about content. You've been talking about the type of content. So we're going to jump in today and hopefully learn a lot from you. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Excellent. Okay. So my first question is really, as we're moving into, we're in Q2 already of 2019. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see for content marketing and digital sales teams in 2019?
Well, I think a recurring challenge that we see a lot and we continue to see ongoing is companies that have a hard time not talking about themselves. I think that this is a strategic and a tactical problem. I think that oftentimes, we want to talk about what we do early and often and hope that the customer understands that. We tend to be very selfish in our language. You look at a lot of your emails and from your sales team and messaging from your organization, and how often do you start start sentences with I and we as opposed to you. So I think that, there's a lack of understanding in many companies about who the customer is and what they really care about. And then in an execution manner, there's a lack of patience and attention and empathy that's put into really focusing on the customer first to earn their attention, and an increasingly scarce amount of attention from your prospects and customers. What are you doing to move your marketing from interruptive to irresistible? And a lot of that has to do with speaking the customer's language, telling their story, leaning in on their issues first to earn the right to talk about why your solution and product might actually help them.
Yeah, that's so good. So, when we talk about things very clear, very simple, what are the challenges that these marketing or sales teams are having that they don't move into this type of content?
Yeah. I think there's a few different reasons that might happen. I think that in some cases, companies just don't really understand their customer. They know who they're selling to. Like you say, well, we sell in healthcare. And so we're selling to healthcare companies. Well, buildings don't write checks. People do. So who are the people inside the company that you're selling to? And you can develop a persona that tells you who those people are. But a persona is different from a buying journey, like the stages of consideration and thought that your prospect goes through. And those start with not a description of your product. It starts with not someone looking for solutions. It starts with getting their attention. It starts, and then it moves into sort of a loosening of the status quo to help them discover a problem that they may or may not know that they have. So if you think beyond just that persona and think instead about the stages someone goes through that are customer centric. For example, if I told you that in your very first sales call, you weren't allowed to talk about your product or service, what conversation would you have? What questions would you ask? What insights would you provide to that customer that make them want to spend more time with you, that would make them want to learn more from you?
Yeah, that's how, gosh, okay, I got like 5 questions that came out of that. That's this one. how are you, like within your team, how are you training that with the people that are picking up the phone and having conversations?
Well, I mean, it starts in some cases by showing people the difference between the quote unquote winners and losers in this game, right? I mean, you can look at companies that have an inward and product centric message as opposed to those that have a customer centric outward bound message. And you can see clear differences in the success of the company. You can see clear differences in the effectiveness of their marketing when you dig into it. So I think showing them the impact of this is the first place to get them motivated to do it. And the second is really to just create a culture of discovery and interest and curiosity about the customer. To create a culture that understands that the more you tell the prospect story, the more they're going to want to hear from you. The longer you wait to talk about yourself, the more engaged and committed your prospect likely is to the sales process and to the outcome you might represent for them. So it's a little bit of sort of starting with like, here's what success looks like, and here's the difference between where you're headed and where you could be headed. But then, it's more than just building personas and writing out messaging and building buying committees. I mean, this is not a marketing initiative. This is not a copywriting exercise. This is a culture change for many organizations across all customer-facing teams. But those that are willing to do it certainly reap the benefits. Their numbers improve, their retention improves, the attention they're getting from their industry, as well as from companies that don't even buy from them, improve. I've seen companies get more referrals from prospects than they do their customers when they do this well. When you're creating so much value at the top of the funnel with your customers and with your audience, that people that have never bought from you are still sending people in your direction, it tells you something about the way you're selling and the way you're communicating to your audience.
Wow, that's really good. I have this question for you on that. Gosh, here I go again, trying to ask two questions at the same time. Give us a story, like who's somebody, and if you want to leave a company name out, that's fine. But give us a story of somebody that's done this really well, has adapted really well over the last, say, 12 months or so, and is reaping the benefits of it.
Yeah, I won't. I'll protect the innocent as well as the guilty, and not share some examples of this. But I think we've seen. We did a training with a sales organization where we talked about this as an approach, and we showed examples of how it works. And after lunch, we did a little bit of a workshop, and we encouraged them to actually write, say, pick a couple of your target accounts and identify who the members of the buying committee are, and then I want you to actually write messages you would give them at the early stages of discovery, right? Mike, sort of what would it take to loosen their status quo? What kind of insight or reframe of a problem could you deliver that would get them to think differently? And then ultimately, how do you get them to commit to change for themselves based on their benefits, based on their business? And oh, by the way, as you write this and as you talk about this, and when you present this later, you can't bring up your product, you can't bring up your service, you can't talk about your features. Right. And I mentioned that before, but that is a difficult thing. And I told people, I said, like, this is going to be hard. Some of you are still going to sort of naturally bring this stuff up. But if you can get away from that, you will create a more powerful message. And as people heard the messages that were shared, like, they were much more interesting. They were much more customer centric. You had people that were previously afraid of making cold calls now enthusiastically calling prospects they hadn't talked to share these insights. I mean, if you're able to create a message and even ask questions where the questions themselves provide value to the customer, you create a situation where the conversation before you sell anything is something the customer would pay for. And so we went from having a company that didn't want to do the training to our sales team that didn't want to be in the training to begin with, that very quickly started to increase the amount of discovery calls they were having, the number of opportunities they were creating, and the amount of engagement they were getting with their target accounts, simply because they flipped the way they talk about problems. They flipped the focus of the conversation from themselves to the customer.
That's so good. What's obviously a great story, and it's very clear the value. When you're talking to like a sales leader or a CEO of a company or somebody they're pounding away at quotas, and from the data I see, quotas are a challenge these days. How do you approach them to get them to take this type of approach serious and give it a chance?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you start by looking at their own metrics, right? I mean, if someone's not doing this today, then, they tend to, a couple things. One, they tend to have very low engagement rates with new prospects. If you call up someone that was downloaded a white paper and you say, hey, thanks for downloading a white paper, would you like to see a demo? The answer 99% of the time is no. You also see greater abandonment rates inside the pipeline. So prospects that you thought were qualified that will ghost you because they weren't committed to the outcome. They weren't committed to the results that you failed in the beginning to sort of even communicate or calculate. So by pointing out places where the company is already worried about, where they're already sort of gnashing their teeth around and saying, this isn't because you don't have a good product. This isn't because the customer isn't interested in solving it. It's because you haven't communicated it in their terms. And so if you point that out and show them the difference in the benchmarks from where companies have done it, you can get someone interested. And again, it's similarly to what we're talking about, this kind of a meta way of doing it is, I'm trying not to sort of sell them on sort of changing their pitch. Like no one wants to change their pitch. No one wants to change their message. No one wants to spend time learning something new. But if I told you that your conversion rate, that your commitment and conversion rate on opportunities would go up, if I told you that the effectiveness of your inside sales team in setting appointments was going to go up, wouldn't you be interested in those metrics? So you start with the outcome in mind and then work back to, okay, well, here's how you get there.
Right. So Matt, you had mentioned that this is a culture change, and what my experience is, anytime you talk to leaders, especially sales leaders, about we need to fundamentally change the culture of your sales organization, they look like a deer in headlights. Yeah. I've heard you mention before too, these are new muscles, and this is some brain work. How do you go about getting that type of adoption and really affect culture?
Well, it's hard. I think I think sometimes people look at this as a tactical project. I mean, oftentimes we will have people come and say, we'll just improve our copy, right? And so that's it's like shooting water at the flames as opposed to whatever's on fire. It's not going to do a whole lot. And as soon as you stop writing effective copy, people are going to go back to their same habits. So I think you have to point out the systemic challenge that exists versus just improving the tactics. And I think you also need to have people at a very senior level on board and prioritizing this as an initiative. If this is seen as just a short-term project, if this is just the marketing flavor of the month, it's not going to go anywhere. And so executive support and sponsorship of this kind of initiative is really important. You also don't have to do it all at once. You can start with, a particular sales team or salesperson, for example, that might be predisposed to do this. You can start in a particular region or industry to use as a proof point and a sort of as a tip of the spear to show the organization what kind of impact it could have elsewhere. So, you don't have to go from square one to 10, figure out where you can do a bit of a trial and start there and generate some early wins and evidence of what could happen across the rest of the organization.
So when I first read, we were going to talk about customer-centric content and customer experience-centric content. It sounds to me really like we're talking about customer-centric culture. But tell us a little bit. Let's get a little bit tactical, because I know a lot of times people they want to get tactical. What can I do? This all sounds good. Give me something tangible that I can do. Give us some insight on this customer-centric content and customer experience-centric content.
Well, before you can have a conversation that might change a customer status quo, you have to get their attention. What are you going to do to get their attention? Send them things that are valuable. What do you have that's valuable? Well, even if you don't have your own content, there is a ton of content in your industry that your prospects probably aren't reading because there's way too many sources of content for them to be able to filter. So what if you became the filter? What if your prospects got used to you sending them on occasion articles that you said, listen, I've been reading a lot of stuff in our industry. Here's one piece that I think you should read. Here's an article or a blog post that I think would benefit you for this reason. And if you don't have time to read the whole thing, read point number 2 out of the 8 tips for blah, blah, blah. I think it's the most important. Have a good day. So I think it starts with things that can be that tactical and that simple. Sometimes, I mean, look, sales and marketing oftentimes is like driving by someone's house at 35 miles an hour and trying to get something into the mailbox. You're going to miss a lot. But if once that prospect checks the mail, it better be good, right? It better be something that they actually want to read. It better be something that actually makes them smarter. And those insights don't have to come directly from you. They can be other people's insights that you deliver. And that's a way to get someone to want to check their mailbox more often, to want to check their mailbox when they see it's your car that drove by. And so this is not a quick fix, right? This is not I'm going to create a better email and all of a sudden everything's going to be better. For most of us that are selling products that have a longer sales cycle, this has to become a body of work. You have to develop a reputation for having this kind of customer-centric value. But it starts somewhere. So if we're getting tactical, don't create your own content, use someone else's content. You become the delivery method, you become the hero for bringing it to them, and you can build things from there.
So you would recommend, if I hear you saying something intelligent about it, give them some examples. Hey, there's 8 points, but number 2 is especially important. But curating other people's content and delivering it up with something very direct and very valuable to your customers is a good place
to start. I think some people worry that if the content doesn't come from them, they're going to get credit. And am I really just sending someone to someone else's site or someone else's publication? Well, yeah, but it's you that delivered it. It's you that filtered it. It's you that maybe put a line or two of commentary or said, like, read this part first. There's a guy he's a coach to fast growth organizations. And he is regularly sending out recommendations for books to read. But he says, like, this is a great book to read, but knowing you guys are all crazy busy, if you do nothing else, read the first 10 pages of chapter 7. It's about X, Y, and Z. I think it'll change the way you think about finance or the way you think about operations or whatever. That is really valuable. And look, I'll bet you that a lot of the people that think that is really valuable don't actually buy the book and read the first 10 pages of chapter 7. But the fact that he does that makes him interesting. It makes him someone that you're going to read. It's like, maybe I'm not as interested in stuff about finance, but the next time you recommend something about sales and marketing, which he will eventually do again, I want to know about. So therefore, I'm going to read all of his newsletters or at least scan them to see what he's talking
about. So it sounds like using content, whether it's curated or your own content, it still just kind of comes back to what I believe is just, for me, a kind of old school sales approach, which is about, hey, you got to be known, you got to be liked, and you got to be trusted before you're ever going to get a seat at the table to talk about your product or service. Is that a good way of looking at this customer-centric content?
Mostly. I think you have to be known. You have to be someone that people want to spend more time with. The only part I might quibble with is the part that you have to be liked. I think the folks at CEB in the book, The Challenger Sale, talk about how important it is to be memorable, not agreeable. Sometimes our job as marketers, our job as organizations that are trying to get customers to change is to politely point out the things they're not doing well, politely point out the cost of a problem that they didn't know that they have. And if you tell them, if you educate them, if you bring up and help them discover a problem they didn't know that they have, you've created a problem. You've not made them happy maybe initially, but that's part of helping make your customers better. It's part of helping your customers get to the result that they care about, not necessarily just executing the things that are in front of them. And so if you want to be agreeable, then you tell your customer everything's great, keep doing what you're doing. If you want to be memorable and be valuable, then sometimes you point out the things that are problems they didn't know about. And so that may be a path to becoming liked, but this isn't about being likable. This is about, being someone that is a trusted advisor that is bringing value to the table.
Yeah, that's a good decision. I mean, from my perspective, if somebody points out, and I've actually had something just yesterday where they pointed out that they thought we were doing really wrong. And for me, that actually endeared me to them. I actually liked them better. I'm like, man, you're not offending me. Thanks for pointing that out. We've got blind spots, and that's a good thing. But I see what you're saying there, that it's more important to be memorable and add value than to just be focused on being liked. So I really appreciate that distinction. Well, I like to have our podcast right around the 20-minute mark, and we're pretty much coming on that. I know that people are busy. And what I want to do is actually let you kind of end us on answering this question. This is big. I mean, this is deep into companies. I mean, we're talking about changing culture. We're talking about changing the way that we talk to people, not mentioning our products. Hey, for listeners that are out there listening to this, and maybe this is the first time they're hearing it, what are the one or two best pieces of advice you could give them to start moving in the right direction or making a few little changes to help?
Well, I think, one is to deepen your understanding of your customer, not just who they are, but what they care about. Don't ask your customers what keeps them up at night. Get smart enough so you can tell them what should be keeping them up at night. And I think very tactically look for opportunities to make your content, to make your communication, to make every touch point you have with your customer valuable. Something that reinforces why they need to pay more attention to you, that builds upon a foundation of putting your customer first. You will have more opportunities to pitch. You will have more opportunities to sell if you stop selling from the beginning. If you get to the point where you earn the right to have your customer ask you, this is really great stuff that I keep getting from you. What is it that you do? What is it that you sell that might be able to help me in my organization? You will have more people ask you that question than you've had people to demo to in the past if you focus on providing good customer value first.
Wow, that is really huge there, Matt. And I think that that really speaks to the problems that so many marketers and sales leaders are having. So a couple of things I'm going to summarize for you. What I heard is tell your customers what should keep them up at night versus asking them what keeps them up at night. That is so huge. And then when you keep providing this type of content and people are coming to you saying, so what exactly is it that you do? And I'm assuming it's because you're speaking my language and the things that you're saying are making me think. And then they come to you, and when they come to you that way, they're looking at you like a doctor and asking you for a prescription instead of you going to them trying to sell them the next new, latest drug, fad, or whatever. Did I summarize you pretty good?
It's counterintuitive to people that are used to pitching directly. I think when you get an audience with someone, oftentimes sellers want to get right to the quick. They want to get right to what's most important. And sometimes 3 steps are faster than 1, quite honestly. Sometimes if you take the time to be customer centric, you will earn more of the conversations you want to have when the time is right.
Oh, that's so good. Hey, Matt, thank you so much for being with us today on Funnel Amplified podcast. This was I'm going to go back and listen to this again, and I'm going to take a look. I'm going to have my marketing team look at this again. We've been talking about customer-centric content, but I got to tell you, just this 20-some minutes that we've talked has made me think and want to go deeper with everything that we're doing. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. This has been fun.
Hey, Matt, is there anything I will add in the notes about your about Heinz marketing? We can even link to some books. Is there anything else that we can do to help promote you and your business or share with our audience?
I think you just did. I mean, like this is how, honestly, Brandon, this is how we sell. Is that we take the time to do things like this. We're an open book about the things we're learning. If you go to our website, heinzmarketing.com, you're going to find literally thousands of blog posts. You're going to find best practice guides. You're going to find, recorded webinars. They're all free, and it's a ton of great information. And that's what we do to kind of practice what we preach, to show people that we can bring good value and that we understand some of the challenges they're facing. So no strings attached. So, anyone that wants to learn more beyond the kind of 20 or so minutes we got here would welcome you on the website, and appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Matt, I can testify as somebody on your mailing list that as I, in about 2012, 13, realized that the world was changing quickly and the things that I thought I knew weren't really relevant anymore. Your blog, your company was one of the companies that I found, and I started reading and was on your database for a long time. So everything he just said, everybody, go to heinzmarketing.com, look at their blog, go look for Sales Pipeline Radio, listen to his podcast. Matt is somebody that is definitely worth following and listening to. And so, Matt, once again, thank you for being here today. And everybody, it was Matt Heinz with Heinz Marketing. And thank you so much again for being with us at the Funnel Amplified podcast. Have a great day. Hey, Funnel Amplifiers, thanks for listening. Did you know that we post new videos every day on our YouTube channel? Go to FunnelAmplified.com/YouTube and subscribe so you won't miss out on our new content. Again, it's FunnelAmplified.com/YouTube. Subscribe now, and thanks again.